Alrighty, hello, and thank you for joining us today with our webinar with Matchcraft. My name is Dara. I'm the social media coordinator for Localogy, and I will be your host for today's event. A few housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar is being recorded and will be circulated to all attendees with the presentation within 24 hours of the broadcast. Questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end. You can, however, ask questions at any time during the broadcast by using the question window in your control panel. Our speaker today is Amy Slott from Matchcraft, but I'm going to go ahead and toss it over to Charles Laughlin, one of the Localogy analysts, and he will take it from there. Charles, thank you.
Thank you, Dara. Thanks everyone for joining us today. It's great to be here and looking forward to an interesting conversation about the DIY SMB. And I'm going to hand it over to Amy Slott, who's Director of Marketing Performance at Matchcraft, to walk us through kind of what the state of the art with the DIY SMB is. It's always an interesting topic of debate on how much or how little small businesses want to DIY. Whatever it is. So Amy, why don't you start telling us about what the state of the art with SMBs and DIY is?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Charles. Thank you everyone for joining me on this discussion this afternoon. We know that there has been an increase in the number of digital native business owners due to the recent pandemic. All signs are pointing towards that emergence and importance of DIY in advertising technology. Today, we'll talk about why self-serve technology isn't just a good to offer solution anymore. It is the need of the hour for advertisers, for resellers, and for technology partners. A quick look at what we're going to talk about. We'll review what the Great Disruptor is, how that disruptor has changed B2B buying behavior. We'll look at some of the benefits of self-serve and the barriers to being successful at it. And then lastly, we'll dive into some best practices that we've observed at Matchcraft as a couple of our clients have enabled a self-serve solution. So the Great Disruptor, there's a lot of people who believe that the Great Disruptor is COVID. And of course, that has certainly disrupted our lives quite a bit. But from the perspective of technology, the underlying disruptor really has been self-reliance. The level of self-reliance that has emerged out of the pandemic and the mitigation measures has had a significant impact on consumer behaviors, many of which aren't likely to shift back as those restrictions are lifted. People have learned how to do things on their own, purely out of necessity. You find people cutting their own hair and baking their own bread, and much of that knowledge is driven by online engagement. The behavior demonstrated by consumers has transitioned into B2B buying behaviors as the line between home consumers and business buyers was blurred as a result of working from home. Earlier this year, we saw an interesting study come out from Microsoft Advertising that analyzed the impact of stimulus checks on specific verticals. 2 of the 5 verticals with a strong correlation to check disbursement, hobbies and leisure, and home improvement, indicate lasting trends that are specific to DIY. So what does this have to do with the B2B buyer? We know that one of the strongest indicators of shifting B2B buying behavior is the significance of digitally enabled sales channels, including digital self-serve across the purchase funnel. In a recent study by McKinsey, we saw that even as markets began to reopen in 2021, omni-channel sales options have proven increasingly successful from both a buying and a selling perspective. The really important takeaway here, and in the data that's represented on this slide, is to recognize that digital self-serve doesn't start with the sale. It starts during the research phase. As buyers are increasingly self-reliant, their need to digest easily accessible information has become readily apparent. Further reinforcing that idea and the effectiveness of digital selling models is some more research in a slightly older or more recent study from McKinsey is that up to 80% of B2B buyers don't want to interact with sales reps in person, even post-COVID. The challenge for sales organizations becomes making sure that you're offering engaging content to attract new buyers and equipping them with the information they need to both make a decision and to manage their products independently. Layer on top of that a need to adapt to a more consultative sales approach through your digital channels. And it's clear that having that combination of both remote sales and digital channels has become a necessity.
Hey, Amy, I just had a question, observation on this data point. I'm wondering, how much of this don't want to interact with a rep in person post-COVID is just kind of a result of the ease of just doing everything on Zoom, and if it's more about that than anything else, or is this more of a shift? Does this really reflect a shift to DIY?
Charles, that's an interesting question. I think it's a little bit of both, actually. The prevalence of digitally enabled solutions that came out of lockdown has really permeated our society in a way that we never would have imagined. People who had never had a video conference are now attending them regularly. I, for one, could never have imagined my dad asking me to set up a Zoom for a family get together, right? We're seeing a lot of that. People are becoming a lot more comfortable with technology in general. And as a result, they're feeling more empowered to do things on their own. So it's kind of a chicken and an egg scenario where self-reliance is that driving force.
Okay.
So we've talked about what the needs are for self-service. Now let's take a quick look at some of the benefits of self-serve. Self-serve opens up access to that DIY market we were talking about. The self-serve software market is expected to grow by more than 20% from 2020 to 2027. A lot of that is driven by the need to increase both productivity and operating efficiency. But it's also driven by an increased self-reliance. Business owners integrate the skills that they've cultivated as consumers into their buying behavior, and the end result is a buyer whose digital savvy is far stronger than it ever has been. The result of self-serve is both a lower cost of acquisition and a lower cost of service. Harvard Business Review estimates that the cost of a DIY transaction is measured in pennies, while a live interaction is more than $13 for a B2B company. Self-serve ad platforms eliminate steps from that traditional buying process, but the key to successfully lowering your cost per acquisition is to offer your advertisers a solution that is intuitive, easy to use, and that provides help and answers without engaging a support person. As an added bonus, if you can add to that platform the well-developed resource for troubleshooting, your operational costs incurred with help desk support can also be reduced.
So, Amy, I'm wondering if you sort of described the kind of the perfect world scenario for how self-serve can drive down costs, but is there a way in which you could do the opposite and increase costs if it's not done properly?
Yeah, absolutely there is. If it's not done properly, I think one of the common misconceptions about self-serve is that it is a hands-off solution. A sort of if you build it, they will come type of approach. But it's just the opposite of that. In order for it to truly be successful, it has to be treated like a service model. If the solution is too complicated or doesn't effectively enable the buyer, it will end up costing more in the long run. So some more benefits to a self-serve solution. Self-serve acts as an always-on sales channel. Another side effect of the great disruptor is that the line between the end of a workday and the start of me time has become even more blurry, right? How many of you work in a home office and you catch yourself waking up in the middle of the night and answering emails and being productive at times you may not have been before COVID? Whether it's researching, starting an ad campaign, or checking in on a campaign's performance, buyers, especially local business owners, they have a need to be able to manage their business around the clock. A self-serve solution will attract customers before the sales process starts and will keep them engaged long after your sales reps clock out. And finally, a benefit of self-serve is that it increases your sales leads. Having a self-serve channel is a valuable tool that can support the buyer across the customer journey. It's not only a place for buyers to transact business, it provides opportunities for upsell and additional offerings that are available throughout your product suite. We know that there is a need for self-serve based on changing buying behavior, and there are benefits for both the reseller and the buyer. So what's getting in the way? Before we get to those barriers, though, let's take a quick look at 3 of the main options for entering into the self-serve market. Organizations need to ask themselves, do we buy it, do we build it, or do we rent it? All 3 have their own pros and cons that should be taken into consideration alongside the elements of your existing tech stack, what elements are proprietary, and which elements need to be provisioned by a vendor. Certain products, of course, lend themselves intuitively to a self-serve model than others. And all of that needs to be taken into consideration when answering the question, do we buy it, do we build it, or do we rent it? Buying, of course, is a solution. If you have a very large checkbook, it is an option worth exploring, but in the end, it is procuring an existing solution going to meet all the needs of your organization. The second option to build it is a viable solution for those who have existing technical resources and ad buying know-how. The upside is that you have control over the platform and its integration into your current tech stack, but to be successful will require 100% top-down commitment. It will require limitless patience and expert level knowledge of Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and all of the applicable APIs. The final option, and likely the most viable for most organizations, is to rent a solution. By partnering with a tech provider with expertise in relevant API functionality, you significantly reduce development time and you simplify your ongoing maintenance needs by building on top of existing technology. The result is a faster time to market and fewer resource demands that result in savings of both time and money. So let's look at some of the barriers. These really are kind of no-brainers, but we're going to talk about them in the context of self-serve. Time and resources obviously are a huge barrier to building your own. It's really not news that developing your own self-service advertising platform would be a significant investment in time and resources. Pair that up with the prioritization of those resources. Anyone who has ever dealt in product development has sat in a product meeting where you look at your product roadmap and you question, how can you possibly add anything else to this list? The third barrier is product knowledge. Achieving any sort of expert level knowledge of the technology behind search, social, listings distribution, reputation management, all of that takes years. And when your team already has a unique product set, does it really make sense to devote limited resources to learning new tech well enough to build it on your own? And lastly, of course, is cost. Uh, Cost could be the only thing on this list, right? Developing your own technology has a hefty price tag. Does that cost make sense for your organization, or would you be better served by renting technology that already exists? They're all questions to consider in the context of your existing tech stack and which products are proprietary and which can feasibly be provisioned with a self-serve solution.
So, I mean, I think it's clear if you're going to build it yourself, that's the slowest way to do this, right? And most expensive too. But if someone is going to partner to rent a solution, how long does it take to be up and running? I'm just curious what typically what that is.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Our experience has shown us that the answer to that is all across the board, right? It depends on the level of technical capabilities in residence at the company doing the integration, how sophisticated and complex the existing workflow is, and what products are being integrated. Some products are pretty clear cut, and others, like Google Ads, are a lot more complex and require a lot more development to go into them. I think a realistic assumption would be 6 months to a year is realistic for getting a self-serve platform integrated in with existing technology. Where to build it on your own, you're looking at a year or two at minimum to develop and build out that
Presumably,
solution.
if you buy, it's faster, but that may not necessarily be true all the time, right?
Right. You have all sorts of negotiations, and then is the bot solution the right solution for your organization? We've certainly all heard stories where an existing tech solution was brought in-house and it didn't really function the way they thought it did. And they ended up having to go back and retrofit and that sort of thing. So buying, it seems like it would be the easiest solution, but that isn't always the case. So let's take a look at some of the best practices that we have uncovered. We have extensive experience working with partners who have adapted to a self-serve model. And really, the underlying message of this is that automation and ease of use should be the bedrock of any successful self-serve platform. For local business owners, many of whom don't have a dedicated marketing staff, giving them an easy button for their advertising is key, and it is what will enable them to manage their campaigns and focus on operating their business. So first and foremost, the most critical step in this process is getting in the right headspace. The goal isn't just to save money. It is to decrease the amount of time between a buyer's intent and a buyer's action. Self-serve should be the best experience a customer can have. Closely related to that is that self-serve is a service model. You cannot improve a customer's experience by pushing them behind a self-serve wall. Your sales reps and customer support teams need to take on a consultative role and empower buyers with the information they need to be successful. Third is to closely monitor your customer success. Self-serve allows customers to complete simple transactions on their own, which frees up sellers to focus on what they do best, which is building and maintaining relationships with customers. Understand, though, that even though it's automated, it still needs monitoring for automations to work seamlessly. You have to keep the human touch for complex interactions. it's also important to understand that going self-serve is way more than just going digital. You have to build a self-serve experience. And last but not least, don't overlook retention. Churn rate is a real issue in our industry. Reducing your DIY customer churn rate can be achieved with a few simple strategies when it comes to self-serve. Make sure that you have a robust knowledge base. You can publish how-to articles and answers to FAQs. Make sure those are organized in a logical manner, and make sure your content is easy to find through your Help Center search tool. And lastly, make sure you're providing them some level of 24/7 support. So use automation tools like chatbots that have pre-stored answers to some of your most frequently asked questions. And then again, making sure that your knowledge base is robust and easily accessible. So let's take a look at some of the organizations that we have worked with who have successfully adopted self-serve into their solution set. Probably my most favorite implementation of self-serve has been watching the evolution of Dan Ads. It is an excellent example of a self-serve platform that has integrated ad sales into existing content providers like Hulu, Hearst Magazines, TripAdvisor, and Advanced Local. Not only can you self-serve your ad inventory on their O&O sites, Dan Ads also offers search and social products through its integration with Matchcraft. So it gives customers, advertising customers of Hulu or Hearst Magazine properties, the ability to self-serve, but it's also layering in additional products, opening up the product suite for those, well, I guess you wouldn't call Hulu a traditional publisher. Hearst Magazines would be considered a traditional publisher, opening up some product suites that maybe they hadn't gotten into, or they need to be able to scale in a more self-serve manner. So the second example that we have is with Italia Online. It is an organization based out of Milan. They use their self-serve portal for multiple functions. Specifically, it's targeted to lower budget advertisers, direct to the SMB. It drives a lower cost of sale and service, but it also acts as a lead source of very qualified buyers who are ready to buy. You see this both from advertisers who complete a transaction, but maybe have some growth potential based on the geography or the category. And then you also see it from advertisers who start a transaction but don't complete it and have in some way indicated they have potential for a larger spend. It's a great opportunity to use self-serve as sort of a farming opportunity and a lead generator for their digital solutions as well as their traditional and proprietary products. Their self-serve model as it relates to social is adopted through the use of Matchcraft's technology. And then the last example is Quipple. I love this name, it's so clever. The combination of quick and simple is Quipple. Quipple is purpose-built to provide marketing and advertising tools to small agencies. Through its self-serve platform, small agency ad buyers can secure and manage ad buys in a very scalable manner. The agency comes out ahead because they benefit from the foundational knowledge incorporated into the platform's interface. And Quipple benefits because they're able to engage agencies at scale and in a cost-efficient manner. And like the previous two examples, their solutions are powered by an integration with Matchcraft's technology. So yeah, Charles, did you have a question? Sorry.
Yeah, well, there's a few questions. Actually, one was didn't come through the platform. It was actually texted to me directly by a friend who's listening. So it was more of a comment, but I'm going to transition it into a question, and that is,
Sure.
can sales organizations really make the transition to become really technology organizations doing DIY sales?
Yeah, I think you can. I think it's about, I think the answer to that question, the solution to that is being able to evolve your skill sets in the same way that consumers and B2B buyers have evolved their skill sets, right? You're looking at a much more digitally savvy buyer, and you have to reinforce that same ideal um, from your sales team. So your sales team needs to be as digitally savvy as the people they're selling to now, in a way that we maybe haven't had to be in the past,
Mm-hmm.
because that is going to be the demand out of our buyers. I
Right.
don't think that we're in a situation where our sales reps are an endangered species. I think it is, as sales organizations, I think you're just looking at adapting a much more consultative approach, not being as reliant on that face-to-face meeting. And I know for a lot of sales reps, that's a hard transition.
Uh-huh.
But I think that is what will be demanded of sales organizations.
But and then this is a conversation I've had over the years about, how technology will make sales more, both technology and different ways of selling, more sort of product led and all that, all the various ways of doing it. But well, if you're adding more efficiency, can sales organizations become small, get more done with fewer reps, I guess is what I'm asking. I mean, is that what you're seeing sort of in the future? Smaller, more impactful sales orgs supplemented by technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think for some organizations that is a benefit of adopting self-serve, is that you have um, some level of scaling back your human sales force. But I also think that that might be a little short-sighted in the sense that there's still a place for a person in that transaction. It may not be a sales rep, so to speak. It may be a consultant. So
Mhm.
that role shifts more into where are the places that, let's say you have an SMB come into your self-serve platform and they buy a search campaign, but you have like 6 other solutions that would be great for that SMB. That's where your sales rep comes in, is helping identify where the other opportunities are for that SMB, and leading them down the path of how to most efficiently take advantage of all of those other channels, and why demonstrating to them the need to be on those other channels. So, the outage with Facebook last week is a great example of that.
Mhm.
If your SMB is only running on Facebook, then they're missing out on all of this on a good day. They're missing out
Right.
on all of this opportunity on other channels. But it is a critical error for SMBs to not be on multiple channels, and that's where your sales team comes in and really has to help demonstrate the value of being in multiple channels and not just in one.
Right.
So it
Well,
really
speaking
is, it's a shift.
okay, yeah. So speaking sort of Facebook, et cetera, Google, sort of one of their initial points of the presentation was that, during the idle times we've all been through, that there was more time to sort of tinker and learn and become more proficient, I guess. Has that
Mhm.
led to more sort of going direct into things like Google Ads and Facebook? you know, the conversation has been going on for a long time, is how much will small businesses sort of become their own agencies in a sense. Are we seeing any evidence of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can't cite any studies off the top of my head. Anecdotally, of course, we're seeing an increase in ad sales on both Facebook and on Google. I
Hmm.
think where the big opportunity for resellers and agencies lies is in making it easy for SMBs, right? I mean, I know I have tried to go onto Google and place ads myself. I've tried to run them directly on Facebook, and unless you understand that world, it's challenging. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, and I know this space, right? I can't imagine what it would be like for an SMB who's not
Right.
proficient in local advertising. So I think
Okay.
that's where the opportunity lies. Yes, they may be going there at a higher rate than they were going direct,
Hmm.
but we know they churn really quickly. And that's where the opportunity comes for agencies and resellers, is being able to demonstrate ease of transaction and giving them the ability to run in a single sign-on, easy to use interface across multiple channels. So they don't have to log into AdWords and Facebook and Microsoft. They can do it all in one place. And
Right.
that is really the opportunity. Yeah, they might be going there a little more than they were before, but my guess is um, they'll find out pretty quickly it's not as easy to do as it could be. And that's where the opportunity is for resellers, is to make it easy for them.
Right. Now, the last, well, unless another one comes in, the last question we have is about the kind of the DIY, what signals a likely DIY? Because data has typically shown that like newer businesses with younger business decision makers are
Mhm.
more inclined toward DIY for a few reasons. One, the familiarity with technology, and then two, sometimes a new business simply has little choice but to DIY because of resources, right?
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
are you saying that you're seeing a shift in that, and that DIY is going to become much more universal?
Yeah. I I think the simple answer to that is yes.
Mm.
I think DIY will become a lot more universal, but the reason for that is a much more complex reason. So
Mm-hmm.
we are seeing a lot more digitally native local business owners, right? They're local businesses that are being run by
Right.
people who grew up on digital. That's sort of a given. But you're also seeing this, I've seen it referred to as Generation N or Gen Novel. Um, it's this generation, quote unquote, that sprang up out of COVID, that isn't bound by age. It is identified by how likely they are to interact with digital solutions. And
Mm.
you're seeing people that we've never seen before, doing things like buying groceries online and ordering takeout online and taking tours of foreign cities and things that I mean, uh, my grandma was taking a tour of a city with her seniors group, and I was like, I can't even get my head around that. So
Were they
you're
were they
seeing
running
that.
the tech? Were they doing it themselves, like each remotely? Like,
Yeah,
okay, yeah,
yeah,
okay.
I know,
So the
right?
point of
So
that is that there's a non-age based uh, basically demographic, I
yeah,
guess, for lack of it. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
And
That is
it's not so
indicate
much
that
the
it's moving more
age,
towards
it's the
DIY. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, and
Mhm.
it's that drive, that curiosity, and that drive to be able to do things that they can't physically do because of limitations, or because they're finding it easier. Since the pandemic started, we started ordering groceries online. I
Hmm.
could go to the grocery store, but it's so much easier to order them online and then just go pick them up the next day. So
Right.
it's not, and that's not a DIY scenario. It's really more of an ease of transaction and
Right.
making the most of my time. I don't spend an hour at the grocery store.
Right. Yeah, but back to the first part, I mean, I think the data we gather, I mean, the idea that it's basically going to age into a much
Hmm.
more DIY focused
Yes,
business owner say. I mean, that's clear in the day. I mean, that, you know, what I forget, 10,000 people, I think, every day reach retirement age. Of course, that doesn't mean everyone retires. Increasingly, that's
right.
not the case. But, you know,
Right.
it's a proxy for like the aging out of the sort of technologically resistant small business and being replaced by more of a digitally native small business. So there's a natural sort of time-driven transition there.
Yeah.
But what
Yes.
you're saying is that beyond that, there's something bigger going on with willingness to use technology. And you're
Yep.
saying COVID was an accelerant. And, you know, this becomes
It's an
almost an
accelerator.
embarrassing cliche to call it an accelerant, but it's probably apropos
Uh-huh.
here. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it certainly is when it comes to technology adoption.
Okay. All right. I think that's all we have, unless, yeah, I think that's it. So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
All
Any
right.
final thoughts? Otherwise, we can hand it back to Dara.
No, I mean, just, I wanted to leave these takeaways up here. We know that the market is ready for self-serve. We know that in well executed scenarios, self-serve offers a lower cost way to reach B2B buyers. There are some options, building or renting, but really the one to, if there's nothing you walk away from this conversation, I want you to leave with this, and that is self-serve is a service model. It is not just a product to be sold. It has to be approached with the same care and thoroughness as any other service model. And the goal should be about making the transaction easy and creating a self-service experience for your advertisers. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much,
All right.
Amy. That was
Yeah,
great.
thank
And
you.
Dara, do you want to take us out?
Awesome. Yes, Amy, thank you so much. Thank you, Amy and Charles. Thank you, Amy from Matchcraft. Great questions and discussion. So thank you, Matchcraft and Amy, for putting this webinar together for us. It was really awesome. Lots of great information. A few more items from Localogy before we end today's webinar. You will be able to view today's broadcast along with previous webinars on our website, localogy.com. Just navigate to research and resources and then the webinar tab underneath that. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please be sure to visit localogy.com and subscribe for updates to be the first to know about future webinars. Hope everybody has a great day. Thank you so much.